A revenue goal isn't a plan. It's a wish until it's backed by some of the math you're going to learn to calculate today. Ask any COO, any VP sales, anything like that, anyone who's in charge of commercial strategy, what their revenue goals for the year, and they'll say it as confidently as they know their name, right? Confident, rehearsed even. But you ask a second question. Okay, what changed in headcount, in budget, or tooling that can make that actual number possible? Usually nothing did. Same team, same budget, same tools, a bigger number tapped on top of it. Today, I want to talk about why most growth goals and the resources behind them don't exactly match, and what it costs when no one checks. And so this is Unearth with Shelly Hughes. I'm Shelly Hughes. In this podcast, we talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of growing a passionate, profitable business. Everything we talk about today comes directly from case studies from clients. So it's going to basically come directly from the horse's mouth, especially if you're a middle market company. A lot of these things are going to be very aligned with what you're talking about. So let's go into this gap a little bit. It's like the say-do gap. In the last episode, we talked about calculating your customer acquisition cost. When you're able to calculate that customer acquisition cost, you can really see where a lot of these budgets from a marketing perspective and a sales perspective are really loaded, right? And you can make a lot of decisions based off of that. But what we can also do is decide on, and I think we talked in another episode, and if not, I can do it in a future one, but we can go through kind of your customer analysis of how you got all these customers. What channel was it? Who did it? And how can you double down on things like that? But when you have those two pieces of information of how you got your best and most recent customers and where your customer acquisition cost is, then you're able to do a lot with that number. When you don't have that, this is what you get into, because you're not going to know what your baseline is to then be able to grow. So if you haven't listened to the episode about customer acquisition cost, please go back to the last episode. I think it's episode 80. Listen to that because it's really going to help. So let's talk about this say-do gap. Every year, leadership sets a growth number. I know I do. And it usually gets bigger than last year's because that's what growth numbers are supposed to be. You're supposed to grow every single year. And you can know your growth rate and all those pretty little numbers that are going to make your stakeholders really happy. But the goal gets announced with so much conviction, right? It's in a board deck, a kickoff meeting, a planning doc at the end of every year for the next year. And the challenge here is many times, especially if you don't know your customer acquisition cost, the budget behind it, the headcount, the marketing spend, the tools gets quietly rolled over and not really discussed and not really talked about from last year, other than just minor adjustments. And the thing about this is no one explicitly decides not to fund this goal. It just never gets checked against it. And last week, like I said, we looked at percentages. And Josh Sweeney, he's part of Revenue Scaling, Founder Scaling, I think his company name is. Oh, Josh, I'm so sorry. It's slipping my head. It's late in the day. But Josh, basically, we talked about what percentage of your revenue are you spending in marketing and how much of your percentage of sales are you spending, or of revenue are you spending in sales. What you can do is add up those two percentages. And then what Josh calls it is, I think, revenue commitment. It's like that equals your commitment to revenue. And a lot of times people might be only 20% committed to their revenue, right? Again, I think there's some ways that you can think about that calculation for sure, but I think he's a great thought process. It's a really good way to understand how we're actually going to get to some of these goals, right? The goal is aspirational. The budget really is a habitual piece, and they were never actually in conversation with each other is what we see very often. Let's talk about why this happens. And here's the thing. It's not dishonesty, right? This isn't leadership being reckless or vague on purpose. Naming a big number is really easy. It feels like leadership, it's motivating, it signals ambition, but actually reallocating resources to match it is really hard. It means trade-offs, it means SOPs, it means possibly hiring, political conversations, and admitting something else has to lose budget or headcount. And so the number gets set, but the harder conversation gets avoided because either you don't have the data to understand how that number should change, or you just tell people to work harder, right? And The moment it becomes a real problem is something that we see a lot at Nolia Roots. I own a revenue and growth firm. This decision, it doesn't surface as a single bad decision. It surfaces as a slow, confusing miss. And the team works hard all year toward a number that is never actually as possible. We see this a lot, from a sales administration standpoint. We have a client where they have really great salespeople, but they are doing all the sales admin stuff as well. And we can go through this in the next section, but I see it as 3 different things that are going to help you forecast, right? 1 is how many leads per month you're bringing in. 2 is what is your closing rate. And 3, what is your cost per X, cost per product, cost per whatever you sell. It can show you a really good picture of what your forecasting will be. And a lot of times, halfway through the year, the gap between the pace and the goal becomes pretty darn obvious. And nobody can explain why, because no one is connected to the goal, to what it would take. And the COO becomes the person explaining the miss in the room without really a clear explanation at all. Because a real explanation was set the day the budget rolled over, but nothing really else changed. And so when we think of those 3 things of number of leads per month, close rate, and price per product, price per unit, price per X, right? You can increase your revenue in a few different ways. 1, you can increase your number of leads per month. Okay, maybe we invest in LinkedIn ads this year to increase those leads. Maybe we hire new salespeople. Maybe we get a membership at this other event. Like whatever it is, but that budget's going to have to come from somewhere else unless we're truly investing into this new goal. Or you can increase your conversion rate, or you can increase your close rate. What can that look like? Maybe your best closer gives a whole workshop and spends time, which goes to sales and not actually for outreach or anything like that, to teach everyone else how to close. Maybe you get someone awesome like us that can do a sales training that can support your team in closing. Or, of course, the third option is you increase your price per unit, right? Your price per your customer lifetime cost, or customer lifetime value, whatever you want to call it, your customer lifetime value, sales per unit, however you want to calculate it, you increase that. So those are all 3 individual ways that you can increase your revenue and get to that bigger goal. Or you do all those things and then you can just skyrocket to the moon. But if you don't really think about, if you create this goal and you just want people to work harder, that's not a growth system. That's just a really aspirational wish. Okay. So let's talk about closing the gap. What you can do here, and this is where last week's number really comes into play and earns its keep. So you can take the cost per client, or the customer acquisition cost that you learned to calculate in episode 80 last week, and reverse engineer it with the current budget and team of what they can actually produce. And not what you hope they can produce, but what they actually produce. Again, we can forecast saying if we're bringing in 20 leads per month and we're at 50% close rate and our unit cost is $1,000, we can pretty much calculate what our forecasting is. You don't want to wish those numbers to change. You have to actually make them change. And then compare that number honestly to the stated growth goal. So the gap between them is the real conversation that leadership really has been avoiding. So from there are only 2 honest moves. 1 is you change your goal, or 2, change the investment level behind it. And everything else, if you don't do that, everything else is just hoping, right? So look at your leads, look at your close rate, look at your cost per unit. You can change those things around and figure out what you can most easily change so that you can get to your goals. It might be volume, right? It might be volume of leads. All these are different strategies. I fully recommend someone has to own running this calculation and this pretty much every single planning cycle, because it's not just once. This is exactly the kind of ongoing check we do a lot for clients on a retainer basis, because it's so important so you know the health of your business and the health of your growth strategy. So that is all about understanding the number that really proves that your growth goals are not real. It's basically when leadership increases your growth number, but there's not a lot of reallocation to help get to that goal. And here's the thing, the revenue goal is not dishonest. It's not. It's just unfinished until someone checks it against the truth. And the work isn't necessarily picking a bigger number or a smaller number. It's making sure the number and the investment behind it are finally telling the same story. And this is exactly what that series is for. And next week, we're going to talk about where your best business is actually coming from, why the source should be shaping this budget conversation as well. So I hope this episode was good. Hope you liked it. If you liked it, share with a friend, share with a colleague, do all the things you need to do. Give it a like, give it a follow, do all the things. Get it in their ears of more people who need to hear this stuff. So thanks.